Well, hello, and welcome to my channel. This is the old aware one, and I'm ready to share another thing that God has been good to me to show early this morning, and I thought I would pass it on to you. The question is, has God changed his mind? Maybe Sodom and Gomorrah were exceptions to God's feelings and dealings with us. Is there another Bible event that God has showed his judgment upon wicked cities such as Sodom? Let's look at the second time that God judged a city and stepped in when sodomy was being judged. And you'll find that in the book of Judges, chapter 19 and in chapter 20. Now, a little preface to what I'm about to say. First of all, it has to be understood, and I think that this is very important to you and to me, that we understand that God is totally sovereign. He's sovereign in everything. In fact, Isaiah 46:10 says, declaring the ends from the beginning and from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. What we may consider as insignificant or just a small thing is actually God is working in every little thing. He's orchestrating uh, every little incidental. Our desires, our determinations. In fact, Psalms 115 verse 3 says, our God is in the heavens and he hath done whatsoever he hath pleased. Well, here we are on earth and we're doing pretty much whatsoever we please. But I might add quickly that if you're truly one of God's children, you ought to be doing what pleases him. So, having said that, knowing God does use our decisions, our desires, and combines everything in life, and it's much the same in his sovereignty. It says, all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. So we're here to serve his purpose, and they are working for good and for our good also, as though someday we may enter into his presence. And he says, well done, good and faithful servant. So let me just look at this a bit and see this illustration where an unusual thing takes place, but maybe not so unusual in today's way of thinking. I'm going to read in chapter 19, and I'm going to start in verse 1. For the sake of time, I'm going to not read every verse in here. If you have a chance, you might open up the Word, look in it for yourself, and get a complete handle on what the Lord is speaking of here in his words. But starting in verse 1, the first thing that we see is that a Levite takes on to himself a concubine. And you say, well, what is a concubine? Well, a concubine is somebody that's recognized as having conjugal relationships, but yet is not a full wife, inferior to a full wife, but still has certain rights, etc., etc. So he takes on this woman, and what happens in verse number 2 of chapter 19 is that she's unfaithful to him. And in her unfaithfulness, what she does is she runs away from him. Now, where does a young woman run when she has no place to go? She goes to daddy's house, of course. You know, daddy's always waiting for his little girl to come back home, and she goes back there. Now, in verse number 3, he goes after her. And I was thinking, it struck me that if she was unfaithful to him, if she ran away from him, she's just a concubine, less than a full-blown wife, why would he pursue after her? And it certainly wasn't because he had deep, abiding love for her and affection, because later on in this chapter, you're going to see that she was nothing more than much like what people end up in some wars is what they call cannon fodder. You're disposable. And so why did he go after her? Well, this is one of those instances when maybe you or maybe I take actions or do things that there's no real reasoning behind it. You just decide to do it. Well, this man decided to do it. And I believe that it was under God's divine guidance that he made that decision. So he goes off to sea and get his wife. And what happens is from verses 4 to 7 in chapter 19, he meets with his father-in-law. And the father-in-law is a very cordial man. He receives him and welcomes him into his house. And he's just happy to have him. And they starting to have a merry old time, good time. And what he does is he ends up in those verses delaying the man from departing to his home. And so a few days go by and a few more days go by. And so he's there several days. Well, what's several days? More than two or three, fewer than many. To be more precise, he was there for 5 days. He had no intention to be there for 5 days, but he ended up being there that long. In the fifth day, he was compelled to stay again by his father-in-law, so they must have been getting along splendidly, and I have a feeling the Levite was kind of caught between the anvil and the hammer, not undecided to whether to stay or not. No, can't stay anymore. I got things, responsibilities. I got to get on home. So he decides to leave in the middle of the afternoon. There again was another question mark in my mind. Why would you start on a long journey in dangerous lands, I might add, to travel when you knew that it was about to become the time when darkness falls and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. And you're going to just plod along in that darkness until you find a place to lay your head at. Well, that's what he did. He took off. Again, I'm sympathetic with the idea that God implanted it in this man's mind, and all this that took place, the timing, the event, the place, the situation, was indeed something that God had put together to perform his perfect will. So he takes off on the fifth day. And when you get into verses, I don't know, 11, and then you follow it down to verse 21, you find out as it's turning dark that his servant, he has a young servant with him, and the servant says, "Well, here we have a city that we could stay in, right a little, just a stone throw away. Let's go over there and stay and shelter for the night." And Levi says, "No, I don't think we're going to stay there. Those are Jebusites." Well, what was wrong with the Jebusites? Well, the Jebusite, it was a Jebusite city, were the enemies of Israel. In fact, God had told Israel to drive them out, and they hadn't done that. So they were dwelling with the people, and they kind of had a relationship where you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. So some of them survived, stayed in there. He, as a Levite, wouldn't have him. But as the story unfolds, I might say that he would have been probably safer staying with the heathen than where he ended up. So he goes on a little bit farther to Gibeon. Well, what was Gibeon? Well, it was named after the Gibeonites. Who were the Gibeonites? Well, the Gibeonites were people that had been spared judgment, as it were, annihilation from Israel. Joshua, in Joshua chapter 9, without going to God's recommendations, without going without asking God about something, he made a covenant, he made an agreement with these Gibeonites, and you'll find that in Judges 9, verses 14 and 15. So what it was in the territory of the Gibeonites, of the Benjaminites. So he felt safe. That was one of our towns. Yes, the Gibeonites might be there, but it still was a Benjamin city. So he said, let's go to the Benjamin city, and onward he goes. Well, the plot thickens. When he goes to the city, where the Benjamites are, he dwells out in the street. He has no relatives there. He has no people that he knows. Howard Johnson hadn't been built yet, so he was out of luck there too. So as he's dwelling without a roof over his head, without protection, a man comes in from the field. He's an elderly man, and he sees him there, and he tells the Levite, you come in and stay with me. There's plenty where in my home to feed you, your servant, and your animals, and I'll take care of you. You come into my house. So he invites him into the house. Then, as they're in the house and they're making merry and they're having a good time, then in verses 23 to 26, an incredible thing happens. And what happens is that, well, let me see if I can find this real fast. Verse 22, it says, now as they were making merry and are making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial. What were sons of Belial? The sons of Belial were wicked, vile, treacherous men. Somewhat like wash. No, I didn't say that. No. He set the house round about and beat at the door and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him. What? Why weren't they asking for the young woman? I mean, that would have been treacherous enough, by the way. But they wanted the man? And what does it say here? That we may know him. Well, when it says that we may know him, they're speaking about knowing him in a carnal way, that they may have take him out to have sex with him, and so what happens is the story unfolds. The master of the house went out unto them and said to them, "Nay, my brethren," I wouldn't want brothers like that. "I pray you, do not wickedly, seeing that this man came in unto my house, and do not this folly." The Middle East people, in particular during that age, when you came under somebody's roof, they were required to protect and provide for you, right? And behold, now get this one. He says, "Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. Them I will bring out now, and humble ye them, do with them that seemeth good unto you. But unto this man do not vile thing." Where was the husband of this concubine? He was over there having himself a little quart of something, and he's having a good old time. Yes, send a woman over there. It'll be fine. There's no big thing. So the wicked men of that city, as that story goes on, these wicked men abuse her all night long. And when they're done with her, she's just like so much garbage. They just toss her aside, and I wasn't there. Thank God I wasn't. I wouldn't want to see such a horrific picture as that. She crawls her way back to the steps of the house, bruised and bloody and worn out and sore and just grasping for every breath, heart beating. And then the next morning, the Levite gets up. Oh, what a good rest I had. No thoughts whatsoever. There was it didn't bother him. in the least what was going on with his concubine, his wife, as it were. So he sees her laying there. He's ready to go. He says, "Get up, get up, get up." You think that there would be a word of kindness there at least, you know. Well, I'm sorry I had to sacrifice you, but, you know, I'm more important than you are. You know, and I know what's best for you, too. There again, that sounds like some politician here. But anyway, so when he realizes she's not getting up, he finds that she's dead. Now, this story becomes more horrific yet, folks. What happens is he takes that woman's body, that corpse, and he cuts it into 12 pieces. This sounds like some uh, horrifying horror movie of the present day. And what he does is he sends out these 12 pieces across Israel. All the parts go to the different parts of Israel. And then, in starting in chapter 20, the Israel leaders and the people are gathering together, and they get the message what this man is saying. You know, this is a call to arms. And what do? Well, they raise up their armies and they go to this city and they tell the Benjamites, "You let us have those wicked, vile men out of that city." But guess what? The Benjamites were not willing to surrender those cities' wicked people. They were perfectly all right with their moral acts, with their wickedness, with their lawlessness. They were okay with it. We're going to protect them to our dying breath and for everything within us. We're willing to defend the Sodomites and tolerate it in our city. The period of this time was called the time of the judges. God appointed rulers, and there were rules, there was laws, there was God ordained authority. Throughout this book of Judges, you'll read this phrase, and then in the last verse of the last chapter, Judges chapter 21, verse 25, it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes." Well, that's called anarchy, and we can kind of identify with some of that going on in our very nation today. Every nation needs to have rules. Every nation needs to have laws. No nation should be without God. Psalms 9, verse 17 says, "The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God." Forgetting what he calls abomination should never happen in a country. What does God call abomination? Well, there are many things in the Bible that he calls abomination. These 6 things does the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. You'll find that in Proverbs 6, verse 16 and 19. And you'll see a list of things. But I'm going to point out another one. The very thing that the Levitical priests knew. In the law of the Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 22 says, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination unto the Lord." Has God changed his mind? What a city finds this tolerable, what God calls out. So here's the plain, clear, and direct truth. God brought judgment down on that city for the sodomist actions and those people that supported it. Let me give you a Bible verse. Malachi 3:6, "For I am the Lord, I change not. Tolerating what God condemns will bring certain judgment." I like what Abraham said to God when God had told him, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do?" That was in Genesis chapter 18. That's when he was going to bring down fire and brimstone upon uh, Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, God doesn't hide things from us. We can have an understanding heart. The natural man receives not things of God because they're foolishness unto him. And here's what Abraham said to God: "Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" Genesis chapter 18, verse 25. Of course he's going to do right. Of course he hasn't changed. And of course this is a warning sign to any people, to any nation, that righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Well, I just thought I'd point that out, that Jesus Christ is still the same yesterday, today, and forever. He hasn't changed his mind. He hasn't changed his word. He hasn't become modern. So do a little study for yourself. Well, this is the older world. Well, I thank you for sharing this time with me. I hope you got a blessing out of it. Meanwhile, you take care. You take particular care. Think a good thought. Do a good deed. And remember that the Lord loves you.